Mia stood at the kitchen table, her hands trembling as she held the envelope that would change her life. University of California, Berkeley. Accepted. The words felt surreal, almost like a dream she hadn't dared to believe would come true. Her father, Jeremiah, stood across from her, arms crossed and eyes gleaming with pride. "You did it, baby girl," he said, voice thick with emotion. "I told you those late nights and extra essays would pay off." She looked at him, her voice barely above a whisper. "I couldn't have done it without you, Dad." He smiled, walking over to the counter. "One more surprise," he said, handing her another envelope. Inside was a first-class plane ticket. Mia's eyes widened. "Wait, this is for me?" Jeremiah nodded. "You worked hard. You deserve to arrive like royalty." The next morning at Raleigh-Durham International Airport, Mia stood in line, dressed comfortably in jeans, sneakers, and her high school debate team hoodie. She clutched her carry-on and her first-class ticket, Jeremiah's voice echoing in her memory, "Keep your head high, Mia. You belong everywhere your dreams take you." As she boarded the plane, she found her seat, 3A, by the window. The first-class cabin was sleek and serene, a world away from the airport's chaos. She carefully stowed her bag overhead and settled in. But the moment she sat down, a voice disrupted her peace. "Excuse me, miss. Are you sure you're in the right seat?" A flight attendant stood over her, brows raised, scanning Mia's hoodie and sneakers with thinly veiled skepticism. "This is first class," she added. Mia blinked, trying to remain calm. "Yes, this is my seat." The attendant tilted her head. "I'll need to double-check your ticket. There are sometimes mix-ups." Mia held her ticket out. "My dad bought it for me." The attendant's expression didn't change. "First-class tickets aren't cheap. Maybe you're meant to be in economy. I'll check the manifest." Whispers began to stir among the nearby passengers. Mia's heart pounded. She had done nothing wrong. She belonged here. Just then, a calm, commanding voice cut through the tension. "Is there a problem here?" A tall man in uniform, the captain, stood behind the attendant. "What seems to be the issue?" The flight attendant straightened. "I was just verifying her seat. There seemed to be confusion." The captain looked at Mia and smiled warmly. "Mia? Good to see you. I had a feeling you'd be on this flight." Mia stared. "You know my dad?" The captain nodded. "Your father built this airline. He gave me my first shot as a pilot. Everyone here knows his name. He's the reason this plane exists." The flight attendant's face turned pale. I didn't know." The captain's tone turned firm. "That's the problem. You didn't know, and you assumed. Her ticket was scanned. That should have been enough. It's not about her seat, it's about how she was treated." The attendant stammered an apology. "I let my bias cloud my judgment." Mia took a deep breath. "It's not about proving I belong. It's about being treated like I do." The captain turned to the cabin. "Let this be a reminder. Every person has a story. The seat you're in doesn't define your worth. How you treat people does." He looked back at Mia. "Your dad would be proud. And so am I." As the captain walked back to the cockpit, the cabin remained silent, the lesson hanging in the air. The attendant turned to Mia, genuinely apologetic. "Can I get you something to drink, Miss Brooks?" Mia smiled faintly. "Water's fine. Thank you." And with that, the plane took off, not just toward California, but toward something higher. A moment where assumptions gave way to truth, and dignity found its rightful seat. As the plane ascended through the clouds, Mia leaned her head against the window, her heart finally starting to slow its pounding rhythm. She watched the world below shrink into a patchwork of neighborhoods, roads, and memories, her childhood, her struggles, her father's unwavering support. A sense of clarity washed over her. This flight wasn't just about going to college. It was about stepping fully into who she was meant to be, with her head held high. The quiet hum of the engines filled the cabin as passengers settled. Some glanced Mia's way, not with the earlier suspicion, but with something closer to respect. She wasn't just a teenager in a hoodie. She was a symbol of how quickly people judge, and how powerful it is when that judgment is challenged. The attendant returned with a glass of water and a soft apology in her eyes. "Thank you," Mia said softly, not out of politeness, but out of strength. Because she knew forgiveness didn't mean forgetting, it meant choosing to rise anyway. As the captain gave updates over the speaker, Mia heard pride in his voice. Not just for the airline or the smooth takeoff, but for what had just taken place. She realized her father hadn't just given her a ticket, he'd given her a platform, a lesson, a legacy. He had quietly built a space in a world that so often closed its doors, just so his daughter, and others like her, could walk through them without apology. By the time the plane began its descent into San Francisco, Mia no longer felt like an unsure girl sitting in a borrowed seat. She felt rooted. Prepared. Unshaken. As the landing gear touched down, she whispered a quiet promise to herself, "I will keep showing up, no matter who doubts me. And I will make space for others to do the same." When she stepped off the plane and into the bright California sun, she walked with purpose. Not just toward a college campus, but toward a future she was ready to claim. Behind her, the captain watched from the cockpit window, smiling. Somewhere in the sky between where she came from and where she was going, a quiet revolution had taken flight, and Mia Brooks was at the center of it. As Mia made her way through the terminal, the crowd around her blurred into motion. Travelers bustled past with rolling suitcases and coffee cups, eyes fixed on their destinations. But Mia walked with deliberate calm, each step a reminder that she didn't just belong here, she was meant to be here. Outside, the wind carried the scent of saltwater and jet fuel. A car pulled up to the curb, and a driver stepped out holding a small sign, "Mia Brooks." She nodded politely and slid into the back seat. As the car pulled away from the airport, she took one last glance at the airplanes lined up on the tarmac. She thought about the flight attendant's face when the captain had intervened, how the color had drained, how realization had struck like a bolt of lightning. Not just because she had made a mistake, but because the world had just flipped on her. In her eyes, Mia had been a nobody. But in truth, she was the daughter of a man who had built something powerful, something inclusive, something bigger than prejudice. But even more than that, Mia was her own force. She had stayed calm. Held her ground. Carried herself with quiet dignity in a moment where many would have crumbled. That strength wasn't inherited, it was hers. The car weaved through the streets of San Francisco. Hills rose and fell like waves, the city's skyline slowly coming into view. The university loomed in the distance, a place of learning, yes, but also a stage for her next chapter. She thought about the other young women who might one day sit in that same first-class seat, wearing the same hoodie, facing the same assumptions. She hoped, by then, the outcome would be different, not because of the captain, or because of who their parents were. But because the world had finally learned to look deeper, listen longer, and judge less. As the car pulled up to her dorm, Mia stepped out and took a deep breath. The air was crisp, filled with the sound of students laughing, doors opening, books being carried in backpacks, beginnings. She looked up at the ivy-covered building in front of her and smiled. This was her runway now. And she was ready to soar. Mia rolled her suitcase toward the dorm entrance, her sneakers tapping softly against the stone path. As she stepped inside, she was met with a warm hum of excitement, new students checking in, families saying goodbye, laughter echoing down the hallways. It was a symphony of possibilities, and she was a note in that song. She checked in, found her room, and stood for a moment in the doorway, taking it all in. A small bed, a desk, and a window that looked out over the courtyard. It wasn't much, but it was hers. A blank canvas. A new start. Unzipping her suitcase, Mia pulled out a photo. It was old, worn at the corners, her and her dad standing in front of a hangar, both in matching flight jackets. On the back, in her father's looping handwriting, were the words, "Let the sky be your starting line, not your limit." She taped it to the wall above her desk and sat down for a moment, letting the weight of everything settle in. The memory of the flight was still fresh, the assumptions, the confrontation, the quiet justice that followed. But here, in this new space, it felt distant. Like something she had left on the runway. Her phone buzzed. A message from Captain Ron. "Proud of how you handled yourself today. Your dad would be too. Remember, wings aren't given. They're earned. Go make history." Mia smiled, the kind of smile that rises from the soul. She looked out the window at the campus below, students moving with energy and anticipation, and she knew, deep down, she wasn't just here to attend. She was here to lead. To challenge. To inspire. She wouldn't let that moment on the plane define her. But she would let it fuel her. Because every injustice, every ignorant glance, every careless assumption, it was proof that her work was still needed. And she was just getting started. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a golden glow over the campus, Mia sat back in her chair, her fingers resting on the edge of her desk. The world outside seemed vast, full of unspoken challenges and untold stories. She could almost hear her father's voice, steady and sure, "The world doesn't change overnight, but it changes when we stand up." She exhaled slowly, the weight of that truth grounding her. The journey ahead wouldn't be easy, she knew that. There would be moments when she'd be tested, when she'd face doubts not just from others but from within herself. And yet, something had shifted inside her. The injustice she had faced wasn't just an obstacle. It was a call to action. A reminder that progress isn't passive. It requires action, courage, and sometimes, a little bit of defiance. Mia glanced at the photo of her and her dad once more. She could almost hear his laugh, the way he would always tell her, "The skies may be full of clouds, but don't let them block your view." In that moment, Mia understood what he meant. It wasn't just about flying. It was about living a life that never let obstacles, or prejudice, dim your light. She wasn't just here to take up space, she was here to claim it, to make sure that every step she took left a mark. The world would try to label her, just as it tried to label others. But Mia knew this, she was not defined by what people assumed about her. She was defined by how she chose to rise above it, how she chose to speak up, to educate, to break barriers. The plane, the flight attendant, the assumptions, those were just pieces of the puzzle. She was the one who would put it together. And as Mia stood up and walked to the window, gazing out at the sprawling campus beneath the setting sun, she made a silent promise to herself and to the world. She would never let an unjust moment go unanswered. She would soar, no matter the clouds, and help others rise with her. As the final notes of the voiceover echoed in the background, Mia's journey was just beginning. It wasn't about one act of courage, one challenge overcome. It was the quiet, persistent work that would follow, challenging assumptions, sparking conversations, and dismantling the systems that tried to hold others back. She thought back to the moment on the plane, to how quickly things had escalated and how, in that split second, she had been reduced to something less than human by the flight attendant's actions. That experience wasn't just about her, it was about all the lives and stories that were erased or minimized when people weren't seen for who they truly were. Injustice didn't just sting in the moment. It rippled outward, leaving scars on whole communities. But Mia wasn't just going to stand there, paralyzed by the weight of it all. She was going to be part of the ripple that would break the chains, to challenge the status quo by embracing a new kind of power, the power of human connection, empathy, and mutual respect. The weeks following the incident at the airport passed in a blur of advocacy, conversations, and quiet moments of reflection. Mia knew there would be more battles to fight, more assumptions to confront. But now, more than ever, she felt ready. It was in the small moments, when she walked across campus, smiled at a fellow student, or spoke up in class, that Mia could feel the change she had started. The stories of others began to intertwine with her own, and together they were building something stronger than just one voice. They were creating a collective force, one that no longer stood silently by when injustice reared its head. Mia was more than the girl on a plane. She was a force for transformation. Our stories are not just our own, they're the stories of everyone who's been misunderstood, ignored, or pushed aside. When we stand up for ourselves, we stand up for each other. Mia's journey is a reminder that while we can't control what the world throws at us, we have the power to choose how we respond. We have the power to change the narrative. And in doing so, we can change the world.